Now we are going to speak about the Mongol invasion or the Tatar invasion. This happened in the Middle Ages during the Arpad dynasty in Hungary. As you see, it happened in between 1241-42, so it took 2 years, but it devastated the whole country, and it had a serious effect on Hungarian development. First of all, we should know that the Mongol invasion, when we are speaking about this topic, we have to speak about the reign of Béla IV, and we have to make a distinction between his policy before and after the Mongol invasion. So first we are going to speak about his policy before the invasion itself, and what happened after the invasion. So first of all, we are speaking about Béla IV, who was king of Hungary between 1235 and 1270. Well, he actually followed his father, Andrew II, on the throne, but his father's policy he didn't like, because his father, Andrew II, the famous king who gave out the Golden Bull, his policy was based on granting lands. And Béla IV wanted to step back, he wanted to get back the granted territories, he wanted to strengthen the royal power of the king. So Andrew II's policy was stopped, and he stopped granting lands to landlords. He took back a lot of lands, of course, which was a quite illegal decision, but he also imprisoned a lot of enemies and punished them. And he also called the barons the greatest landowners, and he humiliated them by burning all the chairs of the royal council, so it was him, the king only, who could sit down. That was humiliation of the barons, so he wanted to make it clear that he was the strongest person in the country. Of course, by this, a lot of barons turned away, turned their backs to the king. So the result was dissatisfaction, and he lost a lot of supporters. Now we have to say that while making this policy, he also had some bad news coming. The Tartars are coming, he was informed, because in 1236 brother Julianus or Julian came home back from the east, because he went to the far east to meet Magyars, remaining Magyars who lived somewhere in the Asian steppes, and he found them in Magna Hungaria or Bashkiria. It is really close to the Ural Mountains at the Volga region. And they could speak, so those Magyars, those Hungarians could understand him. And this is when brother Julianus got to know that the Mongols or the Tatars are already coming, and they conquered Eastern Europe, and they are coming closer, so the king has to prepare. In 1240, Kiev lost. Kiev was the last big city before Buda, or Hungary. There was a possibility for Béla to strengthen the defense of the country. The Cumans, or Kunok, these were nomadic peoples coming from the steppes, and they were fleeing from the Mongols because they were also pushed towards the west by the Mongols. So Béla led them in, the Cumans, and settled them down, but it was a problematic step because, of course, the king hoped military help, assistance against the Mongols. And the Cumans promised everything, even to take Christianity and start their new life in Hungary. But it was unsuccessful. They couldn't assimilate, they couldn't fit in the local society. So these nomadic animal husbandry the animal breeders were against the settled agricultural lifestyle, and of course mostly Christian people, because by the 13th century most Hungarians became Christians, and these people, the Cumans, were not. So they ruined the lands, and they were migrating within the country. So a lot of people started talking about that Kötöny, their leader, their king, and his people were spies of the Mongols. They were not friends. These were also gossips, of course, but they were murdered, and this is how the Cumans left the country and they went back to the east. So our help lost here. We have a king who has no real baron support and no any other support. The invasion came in 1241. The country was not yet ready, though the king recruited the people of Hungary. He carried around the bloody sword as a sign of fight that we have to defend the country. No foreign help came, so the Pope refused to help. They had different political problems. They didn't give help, so the Mongols attacked. We have to fight alone. This nomadic light cavalry was a forgotten warfare. Of course, this kind of warfare was that of the Hungarians before the before the land taking. So just like the ancient Magyars, the nomadic Tatars came. They came through the Carpathian passes, like the Verecka Pass. Their main leader, please remember, Batu Khan. He came through the Verecka Pass and the other passes, the other parts of the army. There was one decisive battle, the Muhi battle, because the first battle was very fast and it didn't really happen. And then the king went to Muhi, to the battlefield. But on the 11th of April, 1241, the Hungarian army was lost. Bad tactics they applied. They created a fort made of wagons, and these nomadic people just could easily burn down the whole thing, so they couldn't be defended. So the army was lost, the king fled. The king didn't get help in the west because he started his flee towards the west, and the Friedrich the Babenberg ruler robbed him out and let him go. So he finally got shelter in Dalmatia, in the south, in Croatian territories. The Mongols couldn't catch him. The Mongols wanted him, so they started to get him. They started to try to capture him. They were after him, but they couldn't get him. So the Tatars destroyed the country to the east from the Danube. So only the eastern part. They couldn't cross the Danube with the army. They started tax collection, enslaved or killed the population, burned down villages. So there was serious destruction in this period. People fled to hide in the mountains. This is what happened. Batu came in, and as you see, there was a first battle, really unimportant. He was lost, and this was Muhi battle, the decisive battle on the 11th of April. And then the king had to flee. The black line shows us how the king fled to here, to the south, to Trau. And there is, as you see, the purple line shows how the Hungarians fled and the Tatars came in, and the purple line shows us that in the first part they reached the Danube, the line of the Danube. This is what happened. In 42, in winter, they crossed the Danube on the ice, and they started dropping out the western part of the country. But this devastation was not really destructive. It was not that serious because there were some stone castles. As you see here, the fortified castles, they could defend themselves easily because Mongols, Tatars didn't have machines to siege a castle, so they actually just avoided the castle and robbed out villages. So stone fortresses could resist. In March, beginning of year, unexpectedly they left the country Maybe because the great Khan Ögödei died and Batu wanted to be present, or they wanted to prepare for a bigger offensive, or actually their goal was only frightening the people of Hungary, and actually they couldn't really take over the territory. So it was not taken by them, they just robbed it out. So they couldn't start a new state or something. This is also a good example, a good map showing the devastation of the country, mostly in the east, and the western fortresses with the stars are defended. This is where in Trau the king survived, and this is where the Mongols left the country, finally in March, March. Let's go on. Let's see what happened after the Mongol invasion. But the destruction was very serious, and the destruction brought the demographic changes, so change in the population. A lot of victims, 20 to 80%. Well, there are different estimates. Some historians estimated the population about 1 million before, and during the 9th century, and then in the Mongol invasion period more than 2 million. There are some estimated numbers that is maximum 1 million during when the Mongols came in. And this is how the pessimistic numbers show a huge amount of people dying, and the optimistic a little bit less. So we don't really know. There was no population counting census, so we just estimate numbers. So the population of country could be about 2 million, and the destruction was not the same everywhere. You know that the western part where the castles were, they were not damaged. Mostly where the army moved, those villages were destroyed. Immigration started immediately, so the king called back the Cumans because there was now huge empty territories, easier to assimilate, and now, yes, they took Christianity and they got Nagykunság, Kiskunság. This is where we find the word Cuman in the names. Yas people, also Stjepan people came in. Transylvania, the Vlachs, Olachs, or Romanians came in the territory to inhabit empty territories. From the north, Polish, Czech came in to get better lands. And about, as you see, 70–80% still Hungarian population, so there was absolute majority of Hungarians. The new policy of the king was absolutely the opposite what happened earlier, because Béla IV started granting lands because he knew that the rebuild of the country is important. So this is what we call the second state founding. He also encouraged people to have armies. So the nobles, the landowners, had to prepare their own armies under their own flag, their own banner. We call them banderial armies, important word. And they had to build stone castles on the new lands because they were successful against the Tatars. So the stone castles are the key of the defense of the country. He also built castles himself. Buda became a royal seat. Now this is the first time when there was a royal seat in Hungary. And in Visegrad he built a huge fortress upon a hill, so another stone castle. The development of towns started. They could build walls, as you see, and they were given privileges. So he wanted to restart the life in the country and modernize. He also called guests hospi or hospi. This is a Latin word, and they got privileges. And he applied peaceful foreign policy. By the end of his reign, barons gained power because they got a lot of lands from the king, and the following kings lost royal power by these huge territory barons. Familiarity started, which is a special status which means that smaller land, lesser nobles became family members of huge barons. But this is not closely connected to this topic. So that is the beginning of the age of oligarchs. We should remember that these are the new castles built between 1300, so before, after the Mongol invasion and before the Mongol invasion, during the time of Béla. As you see in the western part, stone castle building started, so in the eastern part. In the west, there were more castles. Actually, they had been there earlier. Some legend, Saint Margaret, the daughter of Béla IV, the legend says that the king promised that if the country survives, his daughter is offered to God. So this is why Margaret Island, on the island of rabbits, he built a nunnery, and that is where Margaret lived, and she became one of the saints. And of course, there are other saints from the Hungarian history. These are written here because they are also relatives and Arpad dynasty queens and princesses. We don't have to remember them. So just to remember St. Margaret when we are talking about Béla IV. So this is what we have to know about the Mongol invasion.